Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar brought to you by LGcomms and our friends at the Council Advertising Network. My name's Andy Alsop and I'm the chair of LGcomms, and I'm delighted that you could be with us this afternoon for the next hour or so for this webinar. LGcomms and CAN have been working together for about the past 9 months or so now on maximising the potential of councils to make the most of their digital and non-digital assets across what is now being referred to as the comms estate, and that is obviously digital and physical assets. And that maximisation of revenue comes through advertising. It comes through ensuring that your comms teams are on top of where all of the opportunities for that lie and exist. So over the period of time that we've been working together, we've actually managed to identify getting on for £1 million worth of untapped potential in terms of media across the comms estate within local authorities in England, Scotland and Wales. We're up to, in fact, a bit beyond £850,000 worth of untapped revenue at the moment. And that's really important at a point when council budgets are obviously under pressure. You don't need me to tell you about that or what that feels like. But what we do want to try and ensure is that comms teams are in the best possible space and with the maximum knowledge base to realise where the opportunities lie to unlock that value in terms of what you own digitally and physically. So this webinar, this lunchtime, is all about exploring and discussing the potential in that space, what it is, where it is, how you can unlock it, and also about developing strategies to help that to happen so that we can maximise the income generation capabilities that we all have for the benefit of our organisations and our communication teams. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to colleagues from CAN who will take you through this afternoon's session and give you obviously an idea of the agenda. And don't worry, there will be plenty of opportunity to ask questions of them. That's what they're here for, first and foremost, this afternoon as we go through. So I'm going to hand over to colleagues from CAN to lead us on into today's session. And I think that might be Tom from Central Bedfordshire Council who's leading off. Go ahead, Tom. Welcome.
It is. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I am indeed from Central Bedfordshire Council, as at least one person in this room will recognise because it's a colleague of mine. So yeah, good to see you, and good to see a lot of familiar faces here and also some unfamiliar ones. So where I come into this, I did a piece of work for LGcomms and CAN, which was some research. We're looking at what was happening in councils across the country, across the UK, in terms of the council media estate. Essentially it's anything which the council owns, either physical or digital, which can be used for advertising, sponsorship, or campaigns. Campaigns that the council is doing anyway, and possibly paying external agencies to carry ads in support of those campaigns. The research was to find out the extent to which people knew about what the potential of their media estates were, how many people were using it, and what different ways, but also who owns it. And there was some real variation here in terms of, in some councils, it's very fractured, different bits, different services, different teams looking after different bits of the media estate. And in a very small number, there was a sort of a much more consolidated approach. And really what I learned was this is a journey that almost everyone's on to some extent, but the degrees are very, very different. 60% of the people I spoke to, and it was heads of comms, think that there'll be less comms budget next year. There's a big asterisk against this figure because that was specifically comms budget. Now, obviously, in a lot of organisations, possibly your own, comms isn't holding the budget. It's the it's services that are holding budgets for campaigns. So it's caveated that figure. I think broadly speaking, people are expecting less budget overall next year. How many councils are currently using their full media estate? Well, of the ones that I spoke to and completed a survey, 5%. 5% of councils currently say they're using it to their full capability. 80% of the people I spoke to and completed a survey said they're going to be doing more in this space in future. And 90% didn't know the value of their council media estate. They hadn't really, it's not something that had been looked into as that sort of consolidated piece. And so only 10% really knew the full value. So I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of potential, and it's not being realised, and that was broadly speaking what that research highlighted. So what I wanted to do here is firstly going to be talking to Ellery from Haringey. And we're looking at what is the council media estate, what's the potential, what are the barriers, and is it something that we really need to be thinking about right now? So Ellery, I'll come to you. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Larry Salter, and I am the commercial and ops manager here within the London Borough of Haringey. I look at all forms of income generation, and I sit within the communications team and in the wider directorate of culture strategy and engagement. Nice to meet you all.
Cheers. So whereabouts are you on this? If we talk about it as a journey, how long have you been doing this, working on this, and how far have you come?
Yeah. So I've been at Haringey 8 years, so we're quite developed within the strategy. Originally, I was looking at our council publications, any print media, and any digital advertising, and we thought, do you know what, we could generate an income from those assets, both from looking at our partners and stakeholders using that for advertising, and also as well working with our businesses, so giving them a platform to the community they served. In addition to that, then we started to look at, actually, as a council owner, we are the biggest media owner within our community. So we started to look at other ways of generating income. So we do that from sponsorship, corporate sponsorship of events, our own staff awards, Christmas lights and religious lights. We also generate income from filming and our large formats and our on-street advertising. So I set about to do a piece where we looked at renegotiating contracts to ensure that we were maximising the use for our comms teams.
Yeah, okay. And so what sort of, I mean, I know a lot of people will be thinking, what sort of figures are we talking about here? What sort of income are you generating from all of those assets?
So we generate a significant income per annum from all of our assets. Some unfortunately are banned by commercial sensitivity, but we've done some benchmarking as part of CAN, just to make sure that all councils, certainly across London as well, are getting equal shares of revenues. I think it's important to realise as well for the comms teams, yes, okay, there's a significant income for us, but actually as well, we're able to utilise these assets to be able to use for our campaigns at no cost. So part of the negotiations of all contracts should be that the comms teams get full use of these assets for any unsold inventory, to ensure that we don't sort of jeopardize any commercial income, but equally as well, we're able to place our comms campaigns, corporate messages, to ensure that we utilize the space for our messages to make a saving and be able to use our what little spend we have for our campaigns to get measurable impact for our pounds and things.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because actually that was one of the things that I think was really an untapped resource when I was doing this research. It was something that not a lot of people were doing with any kind of consistency or approach. And you talked about a strategy, so you have that. And how long's that been in place?
So we've had a commercial strategy for around 4 or 5 years now, where we've looked at a broader output, some real governance around what we're doing, and actually where we want to move forward as a borough. So I'm sure a number of councils are looking at our EV strategies. Can we build that into advertising? Our streetscapes, if that has advertising, what kind of income can we expect? And actually that's a resource that we can use for our comms campaigns as well.
Yeah. And so, everyone in this room is under the cosh, right? We're all incredibly busy. It's struggling to find time to draw breath.
Yeah.
Is this really something that's worth pursuing? And is it something that's worth pursuing now?
Yes, it's 100% worth pursuing. And I appreciate working in a comms team. I know we're being asked to deliver more with less. We've got quicker priorities. Having a resource that can just take time to look at the commercial output, I think is a real valuable use of resource. I also work really closely with other services across the organisation, from planning and highways. I've got the ability to take time to look at the commercial output, but also as well, I'm having input to what the comms team needs. It's great having assets on our street, but actually, are those assets being utilised for us in comms to be able to use them for our messages as well?
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's really important. If it can be held with the comms teams, I think that's a valuable asset for you.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There's a real variance again of that, and I think the organisations that are doing this best, it is in with the comms teams. That's very much my observation. I think next we're going to be looking at Kensington and Chelsea. So I think we've got Jackie here, and is Dan you're here as well? I think we're going to sort of pick up the next slot.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. Yeah, so my name is Jacqueline McIntosh. I am the commercialisation project lead, working at Kensington through their savings and transformation programme. I was brought in about 8 months ago to work with the team, dealing with various areas, including advertising, event space hire, sponsorship, filming, just really looking across that sort of gambit. Interestingly, listening to Ileri just now, I think, I never seem to not continue to learn in this sort of process. And listening to Ileri, I think it's really obvious as well that one of the things with Kensington is that although we've been in this space, particularly around advertising, there is still something of a lack of coordination across everything. So, looking at this, taking a step back, looking at it from a commercialization point of view, as opposed to each of those individual areas, is just simply not something we as an authority, I think, have traditionally done. And so it's probably one of the reasons why we haven't to date been maximizing our potential for generating that sort of income. Now, of course, we, like every authority, no doubt on this call, we came into this because we faced significant financial challenges still are, have a significant budget gap. I think 40 million over the next 3 years, which for an authority of Kensington's size is pretty significant. Appreciate many others on the call will have, much bigger issues than ourselves. As I say, we were already in the advertising space. We own 80 bus shelters across the borough. There are many more, and they tend to be TfL owned. But we actually, I think quite unusually for local authorities, we actually have managed to sort of retain ownership of a large number of those bus shelters. And there's a mix of advertising across those shelters we have 42 digital screens. We also have traditional PVC stroke paper, and some of the shelters have nothing, of course, on them. And in addition to those, we also own five existing large format advertising boards. Again, various locations across the borough. One of them is digital, overlooking the Westway, and 4 are that sort of classic PVC stroke paper format. And these are basically a mix of 48 and 96 sheet boards. So on the face of it, Tom, you were talking about sort of figures. On the face of it, the council was actually already earning a decent amount of money across those 2 sort of forms of advertising. We were at a seven-figure sum, but low 7-figure, but nevertheless, a decent amount of money was coming in on on those 2 areas of sort of advertising. But I think what the last 8 months has probably shown myself and others in the team is that there were probably 3 essential things that we really needed in order to make any progress with some of this. And the first thing was a kind of commercial curiosity. So, it really was essential that we started to challenge and question our existing practices. At K&C, we could so easily have sat back and said, we're happy with that 7-figure sum, decent amount of money. Do we really need to explore this any further? But we did start to ask ourselves if we were getting the most out of those assets. And was there anything more that we could squeeze out from them in terms of sort of revenue? I think for us, and again, a real distinction listening to Aleri, is that where the responsibilities for this kind of thing actually sit within the services, as opposed to maybe a central coordinating function. You were mentioning there that normally within the comms team, I think that's where Aleri sits. There is a risk, and this is certainly true at Kensington. There is a risk that everything is very much disparate across the various services, and those service officers, quite naturally, their priorities are to operate and provide the service or manage the day-to-day sort of contracts that might exist, whether they are for advertising, for sponsorship, for filming, just managing those sort of day-to-day contracts, as opposed to looking at this from a commercial point of view. So alongside that curiosity, the other sort of thing that was really needed, and I think was really obvious over this 8 months, was a commercial awareness, a commercial acumen. Now, we at Kensington have an in-house commercial team, and in fairness to them, they certainly were able to sort of contribute at the early stages and provide some sort of level of insight. But what did become obvious, and it needed an honesty on our part, was that it wasn't enough, that we really needed that true market and industry insight and knowledge. And the truth was, we didn't have it. And so in order to, it's one thing asking those questions of yourself, are we doing enough? Are we getting enough out of those assets? But if you can't answer the question, you really aren't progressing very far along this journey. And I think also, just the last thing before I come on to how we were able to progress, was you needed a level of courage in this. This isn't a comfortable space when you're talking about commercial and commercialization. It isn't really a comfortable space, I think, for a lot of local authorities. It's not one we feel we ought to be getting ourselves involved in. But we need to remind ourselves, and I think certainly, we had at Kensington traditionally quite a lot of sort of resistance and just unpopularity over the mere mention of advertising between members and even some officers. So we need to remind ourselves that we're clearly not lining personal pockets here that what we are doing is supplementing council revenue so that we can fund those core public services and secure essential resources. So it's actually okay to be commercial. And I think that's something we at K&C have had to sort of teach ourselves, and we're still learning that. We're still facing some resistance in certain quarters, but it is something we have to keep reminding ourselves. And I would absolutely say to anyone on this call, it's okay to be commercial. And in actual fact, now, given the financial challenges we're all facing, it's probably essential to be in this space. So I think what really made the difference for us at Kensington, and where we started to see things really change and the momentum begin to flow, was actually when we brought Can Digital in to support us. Because what they came with was a real, true sort of industry expertise and knowledge. So we had, for once, with all those questions sort of flying around, we actually started to give ourselves that real points of comparison. We could make sense of, were we doing the right thing? How did that compare with other local authorities? Was there room for maneuver here and to enhance what we already had? Can came in and were able to review our existing contracts, review the documentation, not just look at it in a sort of superficial way, but actually really start to unpick, almost line by line, pull out certain clauses and things in schedules that I think, as an authority, because many of these contracts had existed for a good number of years, we'd begun to almost overlook them, take them as normal, take them as things that we wouldn't actually question. And with that knowledge and expertise, Can officers were able to sort of come in and say, actually, you might want to query that exclusivity clause, or, there's a schedule here that might take preference over another clause. And they were things that we hadn't ourselves started to do. So, we began to feel a bit more confident then in being able to scrutinize and challenge what had existed for some time. With Can's help, we were also able to undertake some soft market testing, which was crucial, because I'm sure that everyone on this call knows that the minute you start to enter into this space, the members, directors don't just want to hear that there are opportunities, they want a figure. My background is finance. Excuse me, that's where I've worked for the last sort of 30 odd years. And of course, everyone wants a figure. They want to know just how possible is it for us to raise a decent amount of money. I think the target at Kensington may not seem that great, but the target at Kensington for in this area was about 800 odd thousand. Of course, if we could have done more, if we could have brought in more, no one is going to turn that down. But without that soft market testing, we were struggling ourselves before Can came in. We didn't really know how to sort of glean from the market what the value of either our large format board sites were, or even what more could we have got necessarily from the bus shelters contracts. So Can undertaking that soft market testing for us has been completely invaluable. And it's actually helped us, I think, get some traction with members, with directors, where, as I've said already, there has been resistance traditionally. It started to enable us to get that traction of people almost changing their view and their mindset to be able to say, okay, that now seems worthwhile. Let's pursue it. Let's bring these ideas onto the table, because if that's the source of money that it looks like we could be getting in, we want in. I think another crucial bit of work that Can were able to sort of give us some support that actually we simply didn't have the ability to do ourselves was real financial modelling. And actually that was again, we had that financial modelling done as part of our bus shelter contracts and as part of the large format boards. This enabled us to challenge existing thinking. We'd had quite a lot of resistance from service officers, from legal, from procurement, who, understandably, they almost wanted a bit of the status quo. Their role was something different to the view that we were coming in with. They were wanting to protect the authority legally against risks, or ensure we were following proper procurement processes, or, as I've said already, operate and manage a service. Undertaking that financial modelling actually enabled us to start to challenge some of this existing thinking and go back to those officers to say, listen, we can do all of those things. We're not talking about breaking rules here or stepping aside from things, but there is more to be had. We are leaving far too much on the table for some of these other existing suppliers, to sort of take away at our expense. And at Kensington, I think what we've begun to learn about ourselves is that, and I'm sure that's going to be true of anyone else on this call, is that we had to understand that we have a value in this process. It's not just about those media companies, that our location, our assets have an inherent value. And that is what we should be trying to sort of push and take to that negotiation table and try and squeeze a bit more out of. And it was part of looking at Cannes financial modelling, I think that enabled us to sort of almost have a bit of confidence that we could go back to the table with something and ask for more, which I just don't think we were very good at in the past. We just tended to accept what was put to us, often by some of those companies who are very expert in all of this. So to some extent, I don't think deliberately bamboozled, but to some extent, they spoke, and we tended to just say, okay, fine. If that's what, that's what you said was fair, that's what we would go with. And I think just finally, on that side of it, Can sat alongside us when we met with services or legal or procurement, and helped us sort of break down that resistance. And that's the one thing I would say, is that if you feel that, within your authorities, you have already that commercial acumen or awareness, fantastic, good on you. And it's absolutely something you are going to need. If you don't, there are companies out there, not just Can, there are other companies out there. What we found with Can was that this is a company that has actually worked very much alongside us. It hasn't tended to want to do to us, to produce the reports, to advise from the sidelines, and then walk away and leave us with, how on earth do we now apply and put into practice some of that advice? And certainly I had completely relished the fact that, and I think you'll hear from both of them soon, from the likes of Lloyd and Dan, that they have sat alongside us and worked with us to produce technical documents, as I've said already, to review contracts, to do the work alongside us and really get their hands dirty. And that has been crucial for us. So where are we now? Finally, just to round this up, we've had the confidence. We're still very much on that journey. Nothing has totally come to fruition as yet, but bearing in mind we weren't at this space 8 months ago, we've now gone back to the table on our bus shelter contract, the one that has been really quite lucrative for us, but we've gone back and we've been brave enough to start renegotiating on some of the aspects of that contract to squeeze out more money. We've gone out to the market on probably what is our most popular location for a large format board. We've had something like 15 sort of expressions of interest, really, really very good. I don't think we were expecting that, so it's gone beyond our own expectations. Waiting for those submissions to come through. I think we have another week and a half, something like that, before those submissions come through. We're planning on going out for our other large format boards within the next 2 weeks, probably 3 weeks at most. So that will be 3 of our large format boards, existing large format board sites, back out to the market to see what else is out there and who else will maybe show some sort of interest. We're also looking for what we are going to call sort of virgin sites. So not where we have located or identified locations, but we're almost asking the market, what else might you know of within our borough that actually you think, because again, they know this industry. We don't always, we might look at a location, but it's simply not be suitable in terms of footfall or vehicle traffic or what have you for those advertisers. So we're going back out to the market with Cannes help to seek some of those new sites, new ideas. They've also brought in, and I'm sure that Dan will talk about this shortly, they've also brought some brand new ideas to us around something called guerrilla advertising. Lamppost banners, not spaces that we commercially have been in as an authority, but they may not be the biggest of the revenue earners, but absolutely it all helps. Yeah. And the last area that we've reached out to the market on is sponsorship. I think we did this as an authority in a we've been in that area. We have got sponsors for certain aspects of assets that we use. But again, as I started off saying, the thing at Kensington, and possibly is true for others on this call, is you need a coordinated approach here if you're really going to make the money. And I don't think we've had that on sponsorship. We're now starting to try and develop these sorts of strategies, a strategy around advertising, a strategy around sponsorship. So we're definitely in a better place, but the journey is nowhere complete.
Jackie, that was so informative. I think it answered a lot of the questions that I suspect people will have based on the conversations that I had with various people. I'm really grateful for that. I think I'm handing over to, is it Dan's coming in now, just to pick up on some of the points you made there?
Yeah, how you doing? Hiya. Thanks for that, Jackie. I think you've covered what I was going to say. And I definitely agree though as well. I feel like I'm part of the Kensington and Chelsea team as well now, to be completely honest. But it has been really good working with you and getting to a point of where we are now. So thank you for what you've covered. As mentioned, I'm Dan. I think for around 20 years I've been working in the public sector, Telford and Wrekin Council for the majority, and City of Wolverhampton Council. I've worked in leisure comms, and the majority of the time was in the commercial team, covering various different roles as people do in public sector. But when I was in the commercial team, I introduced, maintained, developed advertising estates for both sets of councils, on the proviso there to drive income and savings. I've recently moved to Canada. I can still say recently. I think JP. I think 8 or 9 months. Although we've known each other for quite a while. So I've moved to Canada to support councils such as Kensington and Chelsea to earn advertising. To earn an income from the council assets, such as their out of home estates, websites, emails. So then the revenue can then supplement any budgets or put back into different service areas to help with the ever increasing costs. I think Jackie's pretty much covered in terms of the work that we've done so far with Kensington and Chelsea, and probably now just to touch on the fact that what else is left to do. So we've already audited the landscape of the council's media estate, identified further opportunities, again, as Jackie's touched on some. So there's the potential for further large format boards to be ran through a procurement exercise. We've looked at the council's small format infrastructure and the contracts, lamppost banners, and now getting new ideas coming through, such as the guerrilla marketing. So that could be projections on buildings, building wraps, pop-up kiosks, and a strange one came to fruition. Well, we didn't really get to the end of the line, unfortunately, at one point, but placing a giant inflatable pink monkey on top of a council building. Who would have thought that would generate a substantial or potential substantial amount of money for the council? I think with web and email, we've put the idea in front of Kensington and Chelsea now, where kind of like a slight spin-off, where we know that the revenue is important for councils. We recommend that not just Kensington and Chelsea, but any council utilises web and email for their own priority campaigns and comms. The ad tech's free of charge, and the revenue should be seen mainly as a secondary benefit. So the cherry on top, and utilising that to focus first on driving strong communications and engagement. We will continue to support and work with Kensington and Chelsea, assisting in tender processes. So any specifications, pricing, evaluation models, answering clarifications, contract reviews. I should put my teeth in really before I jump on this supplier section, and contract negotiations. Again, we'll continue to identify any new opportunities and make proposals to councils, and support Jackie and her team, and reinforcing really that their ability to challenge. I think Jackie probably would have, or is, fed up of me saying, if it was your money, Jackie, your own money, what would you do? Would you simply accept the first contract that comes through, or would you go and challenge and look at what else is out there? I think lastly from me, JP, sorry, apologies, is that from previously working in two local authorities and the commercial team, before joining CAN, the key advice here is really the sooner you start, the better on this journey. Councils are the biggest media owners, can generate hundreds of thousands each year, whether that be from sponsorships of buildings, again, events, your out of home, lamppost roundabouts, guerrilla marketing, or your web and email. Add into the mix of the free inventory, use this to enhance any of your campaign, and if that's free tech or web for your email or your out of home space, amplify your messages, reduce your waste, and ensure that every advert that the council are running serves the purpose.
That's great. Dan, thank you for that insight from that other perspective on it. That's really good. There's a question in the chat, Jackie. I don't know if you've seen it, just asking the 800k target you mentioned. Was that based on your bus stop advertising, or is that a different figure?
That was just an overall target, actually. I
Yeah.
think the one thing I would say here is that from the point of view of somebody like myself in this role, you have to be a little bit careful about that those people that are screaming for the figures, because naturally, whether it's the chief exec or the senior leadership team or whatever, they want the highest figure you can give them. And when you start to really delve into some of this, there's a timing thing. Not everything can be done from the start of financial year. Some of those potential revenues are guaranteed, minimum guaranteed sums. Some of them are percentage shares. So, and maybe not so certain. So that's the one thing I would say in terms of be careful what you promise. Because as we found, the minute you mention a figure and it's high, that becomes a firm target. Our 800,000 was overall. Fingers crossed we may be able to go beyond that in a full year anyway.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Andrew's question is about whether colleagues generally here are looking at the area for income gen, or as a way of delivering savings targets, or as a way to deliver campaign messages. I mean, I think very much from my conversations, it's both. It's doing both, and yeah, I see you nodding, Jackie. So I think that's broadly the consensus, is that it's doing both those things. There's a question from Jessica about whether councils are able to reinvest a percentage back into their infrastructure, or is it being used for the council's general fund? And if you can reinvest, what percentage are you using? I don't know if you want to pick that up, or whether that's a question. I think Dan, you're happy to take. I think JP possibly will put Dan's email address in the chat as well, because I think those might be sorts of questions that people can fire off to Dan at CAN, and he'll happily take a look at that. Likewise, one from Karen about rural council areas that are doing this successfully. I think that was actually something that did come up in my conversations. There were some people saying, well, this is all very well for your London boroughs and big metropolitans, but what about rural areas? So JP or Dan, I don't know if there's examples of more rural areas doing this, working with you, at least starting to.
Yes, there are, quite frankly. I'm aware that the examples we talked about are London-based, and that seems to be where we're most advanced. However, the principles apply in all parts of the country. For example, if you think about bus stops across a rural area, and most rural areas will also have some areas of relatively high footfall, even if they're small town parades or high streets or so on. Also, the opportunity isn't only physical and out of home. There are opportunities in the digital sphere, so advertising in your e-newsletters, across your website. All of these things can generate funds. There have also been questions about what happens to these funds, and I think that's a really important discussion to frame correctly and have control of in comms before you do this. Using this revenue and recycling this revenue into foster care applications or for tools that help you as a comms team do your jobs more efficiently. For example, switching to eShot or getting Orlo into your organization. This revenue can be used to give you tools which accelerate comms, and as we all know, good comms accelerates savings for organizations. So if you take £1,000 generated from website advertising, for example, and turn it into a foster carer that saves you £20,000 a year versus an agency, that can be an even faster way of generating savings for your organization.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Digital assets is another question from Ollie. How do you compete with other media providers? Well, I know that council e-newsletters and e-bulletins, the open rate and so on is incredible. Click-through rates are also fantastic. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to pick up on that question. And when you're competing against the giants.
We're not competing with them. We're working with them to help generate revenue for you. So the ability, when you look at the comparison, for example, of a council website, trusted, clean environment with very specific audiences accessing specific services, that is very, very interesting for advertisers over maybe just a magazine or news site. So the environments themselves are much stronger. For example, you imagine someone registering a birth or someone applying for a congestion charge somewhere. These are really poignant moments to put a whole range of different products that align with public policy, obviously. So we use Google's technology, but we use other bits of technology as well to make sure that we achieve maximum yield for digital and physical space. Email newsletters, as you said, great open rates, but the measurement that we're doing now with a couple of LGcomms members is showing that the interaction rates are better than average news sites and social media interaction rates. So what we see in terms of open rates is translating into advertiser value for either external advertisers or for your local ISCB or your own foster care campaign or your own public health campaigns. Whether or not you use this to generate revenue, you should at least use it for your own priority campaigns.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Are any Scottish local authorities doing this? Yes, from memory, I did speak to one or two in Scotland that are certainly on the journey. Not sure if they're working with you guys at Cannes, but
yes, Scottish local authorities are pursuing it. I think some are way ahead of English local authorities. There's a framework up in Scotland for this, which makes it really easy just to plug into, and then you can unleash a whole range of different services. There's opportunities all over the United Kingdom. I think where you are, there is always some money. It's just about finding out how much. And that's what this LGcomms program is designed to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Andrew just put in the chat, I think Surrey are beginning to do some great work online and via their e-newsletter, working with, I think with eShot and we can on that, and they're starting to see some really good results. I think they started off doing some internal ads, as that's the model that they use to sort of to dip the toe in the water and sort of get used to that and get councillors and get directors used to the idea of eShots going out with sort of visibly with advertising in, and then went into that commercialization of it. There's a question which I'll come to as the last question because we're just looking at the time, which is from Todd, and I think it touches on something else you or one of your colleagues was going to pick up on, JP. Are councils doing this well, centralizing the assets or effectively selling them on behalf of the services who get the specific income? If it's centralized, how is it being brokered? So this is really about that sort of reorganization bit.
Yeah. Well, I over doing this for about a decade, it's become clear that the councils that do it best, the comms team own it and run it. Because the comms team's uniquely able to understand the policy impact of the advertising policy. So they need to make sure that the advertisers that are accepted align with public policy. They're also able to understand which priority campaigns should be using those assets at any one time in a way that no service can, and they can also recycle the revenue into accelerated savings. So our recommendation is that the comms team over time gain control of this estate. It is a communications estate after all. Yeah, where there are services involved, there are conversations to be had and deals to be brokered as you suggest. But the optimal is that comms have permission from SLT to have control of this estate. Cool, but I think reorganisation offers a huge opportunity as organisations appear and disappear and contracts are novated. There is an opportunity which we think should not be missed to get control of these estates, to negotiate, to renegotiate so that they're in the shape that we need them, i.e. there is significant inventory ready for public sector priority campaigns for free, that the share of revenue is at a fair and even rate in many places at the same time, and that the comms teams have control, not just for their own organisation, but be able to cross-pollinate between health, transport, and so on. So combined authorities, the unitary, everyone involved in this process should be thinking in our minds over the next few years about how they get control of that process. And it can be daunting in terms of the level of complexity, but we have quite a bit of experience in this, and as Jackie was saying, we'll work with you, shoulder to shoulder with you as your sort of back office person to deal with that complexity. One key element of dealing with that complexity is to prioritize. We have a lot of experience based on yield and ease of implementation about what you should do first to unleash savings quickest. And then you basically work down that list. There are some things that are quite high maintenance, low yield, which you may never get to. But we'll make sure that where there is big opportunity, you're there and you get best value. And we're very keen to anyone that's interested in looking at as they go through reorganisation, get in touch with Dan, get in touch with Lloyd or me or Ilaria or whoever you like, and we'll be with you through that process to make sure you end up with the best outcome from it.
Awesome, that's great. Okay, we're coming to the close of the time. I mean, I think we've heard from Ellery at Haringey, put in place a strategic and coordinated approach, good governance, and is now realising significant income, plus using the media estate for council campaigns to save money across the authority. Jackie picked up on that point about if it's not consolidated, you're not maximising the potential. She talked about commercial curiosity, commercial awareness, and courage, and how Can had actually, you guys had sort of brought a lot of that, including that expertise, but also the soft market testing and helping to gain traction with members and directors. And again, going back to the research that I did, this came up a lot. Because one of the questions was about what are the barriers to you making further progress, and that was really one of the top responses to that was the sort of political or organizational barrier there. Help with real financial modeling, and to help challenge existing thinking and build that business case. And I think really overall, there's a strong message here about not underestimating the value of council media estates, whether physical, in which case, as has been said here, we are the biggest media owners often in an area, but also digital, like the work that Surrey are doing, which has been referenced in the chat. And something that came across to me very much is in the research work and further conversations that we've had about this. LGcomms Academy, we did a similar session to this, and this came up again and again. It's really getting this sense that it's not a question of if councils go down this route, it's a question of when. And those that are reaping the rewards of this are all saying the same thing, which is the time is now, because it takes time. It takes time to get established. It takes time to realize the benefits. It doesn't happen overnight, but that makes it all the more important to get to get going on this as soon as possible. So, I mean, I think that's it from me. I don't know if there's anyone else from Can, anyone else who wants to sort of wrap up.
Tom, you couldn't have put it better ourselves. And yes, anyone that wants to just have a conversation about what's possible for them, please get in touch with Dan O'Leary or anyone like that. We've already found, just with this last 9 months with LGcomms, about 850,000. There's more there, even with the people we've already spoken to. So to find out what your share is, get involved, and hopefully we can achieve our campaign objective of £1.5 million realised for financial year 25-26.